Thank you for joining. I know we have some folks still kind of joining in, but I do want to go ahead and get started. Thank you for attending the Knowledge Management Academy. So if this is your first time attending, maybe you've been on a couple of other ones in the past, this is an Academy series that's purely focused on kind of using knowledge management within ServiceNow. So it's a newer Academy series that we have out. We just launched it in January. And kind of what we're focusing on are just different areas. There's a getting started session that we did in January that you can review. We did a Washington, D.C. session where we really kind of took a look at the Knowledge V3 homepage deprecation that you may have seen in release notes, and really kind of talked about what we were going to do with the Knowledge Management Service Portal and did a deep dive there. So this session, it's titled Processes and Roles Deep Dive. What I really wanted to do for this session is take a look at a lot of the different roles we have out there. You know, you see the product docs, you see a huge table of roles and kind of a description. We're really kind of mapping them and aligning them to our processes just to get good kind of visuals and a good understanding of where these different roles will come in. So that's what this session is going to be today. Before I get too deep, let me go ahead and just go into our safe harbor and our housekeeping, and then we'll get into our content. So you've seen this before on multiple academies or other webinars. Just our safe harbor notice in the case that I speak to any kind of product functionality that we haven't released yet or is forward looking, just not to make any purchasing decisions based upon the session that you see today. And then kind of get into our housekeeping. So if you've been on other academies in the past, you know, we ask that you use the Q&A for questions. This really helps me track them along the way. I will be answering them live. And then also at the end, Zoom sends me a nice transcript of all the questions, and I do take them and transcribe them and put them on the event in the community. That way you can refer to them after, or if you're searching for them in the community, they're available for you as well. I think we're going to have a lot of good chat in this session, since we are talking about processes and roles, and this can differ so much between different organizations. This might be a really good time to use that chat. Kind of talk about questions that you might have for other, members who are joining, or other kind of companies that are out there that are joining, or just to kind of discuss your processes, just to kind of have that side interaction there, aside from what I'm presenting. And then, of course, this session will be recorded, and I'll edit it and then post it on YouTube a few days later. So you'll see all that packaged up, that recording, the slide deck that I have here today, and then that Q&A will all be available on the community for you. We do have a product hub. It's underneath Now platform. It's called Knowledge Management. And we have different little tiles that you can go to access that information. And I'll send a link out in the chat before the session ends, just to get you that link so you have it handy. So today's goal, I like to start out with a goal on these just so you kind of know what to expect and what you're going to get out of this session. So really the goal for today is to explore the different roles that we have for knowledge management and how they align to kind of the out-of-the-box processes and features that we have. Like I mentioned, I know that there's a lot of deviation out there. Knowledge management in general, outside of using it in ServiceNow, is a really kind of mature and robust kind of practice. It's been around for over 20 years. So there's lots of different flavors of knowledge management methodologies and practices out there. So you may be using one that looks kind of close to our out-of-the-box one. You might have a different one that you're using. You might even be someone who's using what we call knowledge-centered service, or KCS, and using that methodology, which I'll cover just a little bit. So again, this is really going to kind of stick to the out-of-the-box stuff that we have and kind of how we've built it. But I know that there's a lot of kind of gray area and a lot of discussion out there for things that you can do with ServiceNow and knowledge management. So this session is going to be really good for those who are either implementing knowledge management in ServiceNow. Maybe you're migrating over from another system. Maybe you have customizations, right? Knowledge management, it's been around in ServiceNow since 2004. We look vastly different from then, but there's a lot of customizations and a lot of things that have been built along the way. We have customers who have been with us for a while. So maybe you're looking to go back to more kind of out of the box and kind of greenfield processes and methodologies, and kind of want to know what that looks like as you're revisiting that and implementing that along the way. So again, with questions, I will kind of pause and look at them as we go. I'll try to answer as many as I can live. I do have a lot of content here for you today. So if I can't get to them, I'll definitely take them offline and answer them. But I'll kind of pause throughout the session and answer questions as they relate to the section that I'm presenting in. Before I get started, I just see a question in the chat. Where can you find the February session? So I'll post that link in the community again. It's the Knowledge Management Product Hub. You'll see a tile that says Academies and Training there, and then there's a link into the academies, and all of them are posted there. I can go ahead and throw that in the chat real quick too before I get too deep in, so you guys can start exploring that. There we go. So that's posted there. So I do want to go ahead and just get started. We're going to start out with the personas and the different kind of roles, and then we're going to kind of roll into different processes from there. At the end, I am going to touch base on KCS. It's not going to be a very extensive KCS conversation. I kind of want to cover some terms and just some overview. But if you kind of want more of a full understanding of KCS, I do recommend kind of going to the Consortium for Service Innovations website. And finding more there, and I'll explain that and kind of link to you in that section there. So getting started with kind of our personas here, we have a couple of different ones in kind of out of the box knowledge management and ServiceNow. Again, you may be following something that looks very similar to this. You may have some more roles that are out there depending on your processes and practices. Some of these roles may overlap for you. Let's kind of start with the knowledge process owner. So this person is really kind of responsible for your whole knowledge kind of process and practice across the organization, despite how many knowledge bases you have, despite how many departments are really kind of onboarded. This person really oversees the knowledge management process. They kind of define the business outcomes and the kind of success metrics that they want to see out of knowledge management. And they also align those outcomes to your higher level business outcomes for the entire organization, just to make sure that knowledge management is aligned with that. They may work with other process owners like incident management or change management or customer service management to ensure that kind of the knowledge processes and what we're seeing out of them align with what they'd like to see. So a lot of cross collaboration there. They work really heavily, or they may be the knowledge admin. So a knowledge admin is a dedicated role that we have. This role really can configure the knowledge management application at large. So not just specific knowledge bases, but kind of what that process looks across the entire application. So this person could be a dedicated role. If you have a larger kind of implementation, if your implementation is kind of small or you have smaller knowledge management practice, you might not have a dedicated person for this. So it might either be the process owner or it could be a system admin. But really this person is just kind of responsible for kind of doing that kind of administrative work on the knowledge management application. And they kind of get that direction from the process owner if that's someone separate from them. You have your knowledge manager roles. So this is going to be kind of one of your key roles in your knowledge management practice, right? This is the person who's responsible for the daily activities and the health of assigned knowledge bases. You have your knowledge authors or contributors. So those individuals, despite whatever role they kind of play at your organization, they're the ones who are kind of creating and maintaining those articles. Your users, so this could be agents, employees, customers, vendors, basically kind of anyone who uses knowledge. And then I put these reviewer roles at the bottom. So knowledge coach and knowledge domain expert, and we'll drill into them a little bit deeper, but these were initially created to support KCS or knowledge-centered service. These are more knowledge-centered service roles, but they do have capabilities to do things in knowledge management that don't require KCS. They can do kind of quality reviews and things like that. So you can kind of reuse these roles if you're not a KCS kind of program customer and utilize them in your processes. And we'll get a little bit deeper when we go through each of the process section. Good question we have here in the Q&A. Is the knowledge process owner, do they not have a specialized role, or is it the same as knowledge admin? There really isn't kind of a functional role or a technical role in knowledge management for this person. So, again, if you're wanting them to get kind of more hands-on in configuring, they could have knowledge admin. If you want them to just kind of see dashboards and things like that, they could perhaps have knowledge manager, but probably knowledge admin is going to be the best fit for this person. So they do have access to see the metrics and the dashboards and can kind of do the administrative things that they need to do. But there's no dedicated role specifically for the process owner. So these are really kind of good reference slides. I kind of built these out because this will be sent out after, and I wanted to kind of have this clearly kind of marked for y'all. That way you can quickly glance at it and kind of break it away from what we have in the product docs. And we'll go through each of these in the process section, but kind of at a high level, you have your knowledge admins, right? They can configure those knowledge management properties. They may act as knowledge managers. It really depends on the scale of your practice and your program. They can configure ownership groups. They work kind of closely with your knowledge managers to get different requirements, right? If you have workflows that you need to be configured, this person can assist with that and get those requirements from your knowledge managers. And then also for templates too. Knowledge managers can build templates, but this person can too. So, knowledge managers can do a lot of what a knowledge admin can do, but there are just certain things as far as configuration and ownership groups and workflows that knowledge managers just don't have the technical ability in ServiceNow to do. Kind of going into knowledge managers. So these folks, again, are really responsible for kind of the health and daily activities of their knowledge base. So they may be assigned one knowledge base. You could assign this person to multiple knowledge bases. You could have multiple knowledge managers on a knowledge base. It really kind of just depends on kind of what your organization looks like and the scale of it and how many knowledge bases that you have. So these folks are really, again, responsible ultimately for kind of the overall quality and health of their knowledge base. If you're using approval workflows, they come into play there. If you're not using ownership groups, so they'll kind of be the reviewers and approvers for your approval workflows. They may seek kind of domain expert or subject matter expert advice for articles to kind of validate them, to make sure that those really kind of technically deep articles meet kind of the content standards that they have out there. They do create article templates. So to kind of maintain consistency across the articles in their knowledge base, they can create different article templates for their knowledge base and kind of give direction and guidance on when to use them and ensure that they are being used. And then they're the ones who kind of go into our dashboards and look at the metrics that we have out there, whether it's lifecycle metrics or usage metrics or other ones that we have out there. They're the ones who are going in and using these mainly to ensure that their knowledge base is healthy. They know how their knowledge base is being used. They know kind of areas for opportunity in their knowledge base, and they kind of know how to communicate how their knowledge base is doing and the success or the opportunities to that process owner. Then you have your authors, right? They're the ones who are creating articles, so they can have, can contribute access or can read access as well to different knowledge bases. So they're creating the articles. They can create knowledge blocks if you have that ability enabled on the knowledge base. And they also field different feedback tasks. So if you're using feedback tasks, they can take a look at those individually there if you're not using ownership groups. Some more personas that I want to dig into. So those two kind of KCS ones that I mentioned for reviewers, the coach and domain experts. Again, they're really more heavily utilized in KCS, but they do have, again, technical ability to do certain things without KCS if you want to use them. So your coaches can take a look at what we call the article quality index. So this is a checklist that you can attach to a knowledge base to have different items that they kind of go through and check off to get a score, just to ensure that article meets all the checks before it's published. So this person, the coach or the domain expert, can do that. They also contribute to the knowledge base themselves by writing, creating articles. Coaches kind of help with best practices, for different authors and kind of communicate best practices out there. And then your domain experts really are kind of responsible for their area expertise. So kind of an analogy I want to give for that, to kind of think about a domain expert. Maybe you have a service portfolio that has lots of different business services and service offerings. This person would kind of be the subject matter expert for that kind of business service structure and all the service offerings and all the articles that kind of go along with that. So they would really kind of be taking care of that area of the service portfolio, right? To make sure that that business service is accurately represented in the knowledge base, and then there's articles there, and that the articles are relevant and are a quality to be able to be used. So kind of think of your domain expert in that area when you're not using kind of KCS, and KCS does that a little bit too. You do have your agents or your users. So your users are agents, employees, customers, really anyone who is using knowledge, whether it's on portals, mobile, or workspaces, or the classic environment. So they do different things depending on their roles, but mainly they interact with knowledge, they provide feedback, and they report different kind of knowledge gaps that may be out there. So a knowledge gap is kind of an incident, case, or other record type where there is no knowledge article available. That would be a knowledge gap, and we do kind of have functionalities put in place to kind of report that and get those taken care of. And I have a few more personas. I do see some more questions in the chat. Let me get through these two personas here. So our ownership groups, we have different roles that you'll see in the product docs for that. We have our knowledge group manager and our knowledge group member. So ownership groups really help to kind of distribute the work that a knowledge manager typically does. So you'll see ownership groups if you're using the Knowledge Management Advanced plugin. You can enable a system property to turn these on, and you manage them just like other groups. So just like other assignment groups that you have in your instance for different processes, you'll have knowledge groups. You can reuse groups. It's just a group type that you add on. So if you have groups existing already, you don't have to create new ones. You can, but you can reuse groups to be ownership groups. And these groups really kind of help with those feedback tasks. They help with the approvals that are coming in via approval workflows. They're kind of responsible for managing their subset of knowledge articles, right? So an article or a knowledge block can be assigned to an ownership group. And this group really is responsible for making sure that those articles are relevant. They have the quality, they have the content there, and really kind of working closely with that knowledge manager to make sure that those groups, those sets of articles meet those standards. So this is a really kind of good slide that I put together. So ownership groups are really kind of meant to help distribute the work, right? In the past, or if you're not using ownership groups, you might have a scenario where you have a knowledge manager or a couple of knowledge managers, and they're really kind of attempting to manage one or more knowledge bases that might have hundreds to thousands of articles with individual authors. So that is quite a task for a knowledge manager to really communicate and contact and keep track of so many different articles with so many different authors, especially when approvals come into play too. So if you have a lot of workflow approvals coming into a knowledge manager, they might get backed up on that. Also kind of feedback tasks going into individual authors, you might have bottlenecks on that. So ownership groups are really just great for kind of distributing that work, right? Your knowledge managers kind of work with your group managers to kind of check in with them, kind of see how their group's articles are going, kind of, speak to that ownership group member to understand, are there any kind of issues with feedback tasks or approval workflows that are going on? Your knowledge ownership groups, they take those feedback tasks, they distribute them amongst group members. So you have more than one person dealing with feedback and feedback tasks now, so you can resolve those a lot more quickly. Approval workflows, you have more than one person reviewing articles now and taking care of approvals. So really just kind of reducing that operational burden, putting a lot more eyes on knowledge articles that belong to them, kind of having that kind of collective ownership within that group. And then also that kind of operational bottleneck stuff, right? Where you might have an author who's just too busy, has too many things going on to take a look at tasks or approvals. maybe they transfer to a department and now that article hasn't been updated yet, and those things are just going somewhere, not being dealt with. Or maybe they even leave the company, right? And then you have to retroactively figure out who should own that article. Ownership groups take care of a lot of that stuff. So that way you don't have to worry about it. There's always someone who is kind of caring and nurturing for that part of the process, whether it's an approval, a feedback task, or even just looking at those articles and making sure that they're up to date. So before I get into processes, I did see a few more questions come in. Let me just take a look at these real quick. I think I see some on roadmap items for case deflection. I do have actually some information on that at the end, so I'll save that one for the end there. KA approval workflows on knowledge bases. Is it possible to allow direct publish and approval publish based on roles? I have a workflow section I'll get to in just a moment. And then the next one is for ownership groups. So is it recommended to have both the knowledge manager and knowledge role on one group? For instance, we don't want the author approving the articles they created for kind of quality check and separation of duty. What would you recommend? So that is a good question. I was going to insert a slide to take away on this. So ownership groups, they do have the knowledge role themselves. They may not have the knowledge manager role. Most of your members aren't going to have it. Probably your knowledge group manager isn't going to have it. They're just going to have the knowledge role that allows them to contribute, and then all those kind of can contribute user criteria come into play. But what I think the ask is that you don't want ownership groups self-approving. So that is a property that you would have to set. So the ownership groups, the ability for them to self-approve their own articles is a property there. So I think that answers the question. If you don't want them to self-approve and the approvals still have to go out to the group at large, I mean, someone in that group still has to take it and approve it. You might have to build some logic in on that, but kind of the answer would be to not set that property. If I'm not answering your question, just let me know and we can kind of take this one offline a little bit and go from there. Let me go ahead and get into the persona or the processes part. I do see some more kind of questions coming in, and we'll see if some of these kind of answer those questions as we go along. So we do have different kind of processes. Again, this is not KCS. This isn't knowledge-centered service. Some of the terminology we did reuse, and it does look very similar, but we've kind of broken this down into 5 different steps in the knowledge process when you're kind of looking at our out-of-the-box features and capabilities. So, like I mentioned, if you're using KCS, that terminology is similar, but it's not the double loop kind of process that it has. I'll cover that in just a little bit. But let's go ahead and get into kind of structuring our knowledge bases and kind of the roles that align with that. So you have your knowledge admin, right? So this is a person who can set those configuration properties. They can create knowledge bases. So there is a request item for that. So this could be, again, the system admin, or it could be a dedicated person or the process owner. They can configure workflows in conjunction with kind of requirements from your knowledge manager, and they can create and maintain those ownership groups. So there's a request item for that. There's kind of like a workflow that happens on the back end for the ownership group. So it isn't solely manual process of them going in and doing it. We do have features in place for that. And then you also have your knowledge manager. So, kind of once your knowledge base is scaffolded and set up and your knowledge manager has been assigned to it by your admin, they really kind of go through and define that unique category taxonomy. They create those templates that they want to use. They'll assign the user criteria for who can read and who contributes. If they don't have the user criteria that they need, they'll kind of work with an admin to get that created, and then they can assign it. And they really just kind of go through and set all those attributes on the knowledge base. So there's different ones, right? You can decide if you want to use knowledge blocks. You can decide if you want different types of feedback on there. So if you want the ability to rate things or mark it as helpful, unhelpful, and a lot of different attributes that are found on the knowledge base itself, they can define those. They have the permission to do that. They kind of are taking that role alongside the knowledge base owner of owning that. And then, of course, they give those requirements for approval workflows to your knowledge admin. Hopping into workflows real quick, since we're kind of talking about those, we do have kind of 4 out-of-the-box workflows that you can use. So we have an instant publish and an approval publish. So instant publish, right? No checks need to be done. let's just go ahead and instantly publish this. Your approval publish, right? There's some kind of check that needs to be done. If you're not using ownership groups out of the box, that's going to go to your managers and your knowledge base owner. So there's fields on that knowledge base form that'll go to. If you're using ownership groups, it is going to go to the ownership group instead of these folks. So that's kind of a differentiation in how that workflow works. If you need to use something other than our out-of-the-box workflow, we know a lot of customers have different approval scenarios and things they want to build in and different logic for routing. You can copy these, clone them, make your own, or you can call this subflow here and make your own. We just suggest kind of not, editing the out-of-the-box one. We suggest really kind of copying it and configuring it to your needs, and then just attaching your version to the knowledge base itself. So each knowledge base can have their own publish and retire workflows. So it can be different across your IT and HR and different knowledge bases. They don't have to share the same one. But we kind of give you these approval ones and these instant publish ones kind of out of the box as templates to use, or if you want to use them for your processes. Same for retire, 2 different workflows, instant retire and approval retire. Same deal with the ownership groups. If you're using them, the approvals will go there. Some caveats here is that if an article is retired, your knowledge base owners and managers can still see them, but they won't be available in search. So if they need to do something or retrieve something from that article, they can still do that even if it's after retired. Other users won't be able to. If you're using translations, we kind of use a parent-child kind of relationship with that. So if you retire the parents, we're not going to retire the children. You kind of have to go through and do that all individually. So I did want to kind of call that out on these retire workflows here. I think I did have some kind of questions relating to workflows here. So that one from, is it possible to allow direct publish and approval publish based on roles? That would be a configuration that you would make. You would check for roles, right, within the version that you make of your workflows. You can say, does this person have this role? Does this person have that role? And if so, kind of create your logic and do it from there. So that's where you would do that, kind of do that checking in your workflow itself. Yeah, let's see. So another one, ownership groups, is user criteria used too. So your ownership groups do kind of have to have that can contribute access to the knowledge base. When an article has an ownership group, that ownership group is the only kind of group of users that can edit it at that point. So let's say that you have an article and it has an author that isn't in the ownership group. So this person authored it. They sent it along for any kind of approval workflows. It's published now, but there's an ownership group on it. But that person isn't in it. They won't be able to edit that article. Someone in the ownership group would have to do that. We do kind of an override system property where you can kind of change that behavior in there. So you do have options to kind of override that if you want to have that ability for that person not in the ownership group who's an author to be able to edit the article. But out of the box, that property isn't turned on. So a lot of great questions about ownership groups. I do have a knowledge kind of academy shorts series that I'm starting. You may have seen one on the service portal where I'm kind of taking things like this, like knowledge blocks. The Microsoft Word add-in was one. And now it seems like ownership groups is a really good subject too, where we kind of create a less than 10-minute video and get really deep into all this stuff, right? And let's just pull out everything about ownership groups and talk about it. So if I don't get to your ownership group questions in this session, I will put that on the table to get an Academy short video out about that shortly. So kind of going in, we've structured our knowledge bases right. We got our knowledge set up. We're ready to start using it and populating it and getting knowledge articles in there. So let's kind of talk about the knowledge article lifecycle that we have, and then we'll get into each of the processes in that lifecycle. Your life cycle may look the same. It may be different, right? It really kind of depends on what you're using. So if you're not using approvals, you may not have review. You may not be using scheduled for publish. That's one that we have in there with the Knowledge Advanced plugin. So you might just have draft, published, and retired. You might have more. Yours may look similar, but this is kind of an out of the box, one that we have and different capabilities that we have built around it. And kind of getting into capturing knowledge. So our draft and review stages there in that life cycle, right? This is where we really kind of create articles or use external sources to populate them. So that's why I included that knowledge admin role here. Because you really don't think about knowledge admin a lot when it comes to creating articles, but this person can work with system admins to bring in those external integrations, whether using AI search, or we have external content integration. You may have seen that in the product docs. That's kind of an older Helsinki era functionality built for Zing search. So if you are looking at the two and wondering which to use, I would veer towards using AI search and external sources. It's newer, it's got more functionality, we're putting more enhancements out. This external content one, we're not putting really any enhancements out for it. It's just an older kind of use case for kind of an older kind of legacy search that we have out there. So that's kind of differentiation in that. And they just make sure that kind of working with their knowledge managers that whatever external kind of content that they're pulling in, it's up to date. People have permissions to see it, and it kind of matches the audience of the knowledge base itself, right? Is this appropriate material for this knowledge base, right? We don't want to pull a bunch of policies into maybe an IT troubleshooting knowledge base, just things like that, just to make sure everything kind of syncs up. Your authors, again, are going to be big players within this stage. They're the ones really kind of creating those articles and either creating them from cases, incidents, or different record types in there. If they're using workspace or classic environment, they may be going over to that all menu to create in there and do that too. They may be importing them from Word documents. They may be using the Microsoft Word add-in. So we have a bunch of different avenues to get those articles in. And they can use article templates here to really kind of maintain the consistency. So, whatever knowledge base that they're creating them in, they'll see the templates kind of available within that knowledge base, and really kind of should know via best practices and guidance which ones to use for those different use cases. If you have knowledge blocks enabled on a knowledge base, they can create and maintain them here as well. So that really kind of depends on your organization. If you're using knowledge blocks, kind of the communication and training that you've set up to use knowledge blocks, and you do kind of have to set that attribute on the knowledge base, but they can do that here as well if they find that whatever they're creating is more kind of reusable content or maybe should be permission based. They can do that here. And then finally, kind of linking articles to any configuration items or catalog items or other related articles should kind of be done in this stage as well by that knowledge author. So for ownership groups, again, we have our authors. They're the kind of the individual people creating the articles. We kind of talked about the differences in using individual authors and maybe the pros and cons there versus ownership groups. Same here. Your ownership groups are probably going to be a bunch of authors, so they are creating those articles. But what kind of sets them apart here is in that kind of review stage where we have those approval workflows, and now those articles are starting to be approved. Your ownership groups are going to come into play where they're reviewing those articles, making sure that the content is there, the formatting is correct, there's readability, and that we're not creating duplicate articles, right? Ensuring that check is there so that we don't have a bunch of duplicates submitted for an issue. If you're using reviews and kind of what we call article quality index, which I'll get to in the next slide here, this is where you can really kind of reuse those coach and domain expert roles. And kind of have those quality checks on your articles before they get published. So there is a UI action for that or a button that someone can just manually click. This might also be an interesting thing to build into your approvals, right? If you're a little bit more kind of mature in the process and how you use these checklists, you might want to start working them into your kind of configured and custom workflows and kind of launching them from there. So you have a lot of flexibility and whether if you want to use this role and kind of how you want to do those reviews with the AQI checklist. So, been talking about AQI a lot. So I want to provide a visual to it and kind of an overview. So an article quality index checklist, it's a weighted checklist basically of different kind of questions and things to check in a knowledge article to make sure that article passes those, right? So each individual knowledge base can have its own checklist. You can share checklists across knowledge bases. We have a default one for you to use that we've kind of based upon KCS kind of best practices in their checklist. So the default one's a really good one to go off of. But your reviewers will come in here and use this either before a knowledge article has been published. That's kind of the main use case for it. Or you can use it, within that approval workflow. Or you can also use it if you're doing kind of audit-based reviews. Let's say that you kind of have some kind of auditing cadence or auditing strategy for articles in your organization, and you want to kind of put some functional tooling behind that. You can use these there as well. They're pretty flexible in how you can use them and when you can use them. And like I mentioned, you can go through and kind of create your own questionnaires and really kind of make them different for each knowledge base. So again, you might have one that's different from ITSM versus an HR knowledge base. If you're looking at this from a KCS standpoint, this is going to be your main tool of your coaching program. This is what your coaches use to work with those kind of candidate personas or those kind of beginner personas, to walk them through what they should be doing in a knowledge article and walk them through this checklist during that coaching process. So I know that the consortium's website has a lot more information on the coaching process. I'm just giving you a one-liner on it, but that's kind of what they were originally intended for, but you have the tooling and you have the functionality to use them outside of KCS. So I want to make sure that we kind of highlight that and make non-KCS customers aware that this functionality exists and it can be useful to them. I do see some questions coming in. Let me see if I can kind of parse through these. So I'm going to hit the AQI ones first, since I just talked about it. Is AQI available on ITSM standards? So AQI is a knowledge management functionality, and knowledge management is a platform functionality. So it's available to all your workflows. There are some paid things like Knowledge Demand Insights that require kind of pro subscription, but AQI is available to ITSM standards, available to CSM and HRSD. Most of knowledge management, is platform, meaning it can be used in all of our technology workflows. But with that, if you have questions, reach out to your account team and they can find that information out for you. Is the AQI dashboard out of the box? I will touch base on that in a moment. We do have a dashboard for that. What's the functionality behind AQI? So report and metrics. So I think that's a big one that I'm getting a lot, is how do you find out how to report on this? So let me answer that one in just a little bit. I know I'm kind of getting a little low on time, so let's go ahead and kind of go through some more of these slides to get to those dashboard slides, and then I'll kind of field some more questions after that. So improving knowledge. So this is going to be kind of our next step in the process, where we kind of take a look at articles and make sure that our knowledge base is healthy, right, and up to date. This is really kind of where your ownership groups come into play a lot in fielding feedback tasks, updating their articles. You might have a set review cadence to do that, or it may be ad hoc, kind of whatever works best for your organization. Retiring articles and knowledge blocks as necessary via valid to dates or other kind of logic that maybe you put in. They're working here to make sure that there's not a lot of duplicate articles within their ownership group. They can create new versions if you're using versioning, and then also working knowledge gaps. So kind of this task that have been created when there's not been a knowledge article found for an incident or case. This is kind of where your ownership group folks will come in to create those articles and ensure those articles are created. Same for your author. A lot of the things that your ownership group can do, your author can do. We're just at that kind of individual level now. So they do, a lot of the same things as far as working tasks as needed, creating article versions as needed, retiring their articles as they need to, kind of getting down to a micro level. They may look at kind of search terms that they're using to find articles or useful context as they're working cases. So if they're working a case and they use an article that they have the ability to edit, they might want to go ahead and just edit that article right in context and add those search terms and add that helpful information while they're working that case. That's more of a KCS kind of practice. And they also kind of go through, just like ownership groups, look at valid to dates and update those articles by the cadence that's been set by the knowledge manager. Very prescriptive, a lot of flexibility there, right? It's not, we didn't put these hard and fast rules in. for when articles should be reviewed and put a lot of logic in, because that can be so different across organizations. But the capability is there for you to put those in and use these different kind of roles and different kind of processes to enforce them. So for the domain experts and coaches here, just like in the approval process, you can use AQI here as well, right? Again, it's mainly used for review and approvals, but if you're doing kind of article audits for quality, like quality audits, or maybe even kind of just random spot check audits, you can use your coaches and domain experts here to do those reviews. That is, the ability to do that. Your domain experts here too would still create those articles from knowledge gaps, right? So if there's some kind of knowledge articles that are missing for maybe that domain expert's kind of process area or their kind of service offerings and service portfolio, this is a good chance for them to take those knowledge gap tasks and create those articles and fill that gap to improve that knowledge base. Your knowledge manager here, they're going to work with the different authors and ownership groups and domain experts and coaches, all these different roles, really to kind of ensure that articles are up to date and they're relevant and they're quality, that those feedback tasks are being addressed in a timely manner, and those gaps are being addressed in a timely manner. So you can kind of really see there's a lot of things that knowledge managers have to keep track of. That really using ownership groups help them do that, because they have that group manager person kind of helping them delegate that responsibility rather than them having to go out and do it individually. But if you're not set up for ownership groups, you kind of can build in different mechanisms to help that kind of knowledge manager out and in automating some of this. So also too, within improving, you can kind of review metrics such as kind of unsuccessful searches and navigation paths to kind of understand what your users are doing and why they can't get to a knowledge article, or maybe they do see a knowledge article and decided to create a case instead. Kind of why is that going on? What are the trends in that, and what do we need to do to kind of deflect those cases or incidents from getting created? A quick slide before we go into content help, just on feedback, right? So this is where your knowledge users come into play in the improvement process. So we kind of talked about all the other roles and how they can take care of their articles and update them and reviews and things like that. But your users are the ones who are, putting that feedback on your knowledge articles. So if they're flagging it, they're creating a feedback task. That's by default. They can rate articles, mark them as helpful or unhelpful, and add comments. So this is just a really great, valuable feedback that your users are giving to you to help improve those articles. And you have those mechanisms to close the loop on that. And this can be done from a variety of interfaces, right? They can leave feedback on portals like Employee Center or Service Portal. In mobile, your users might be agents. They might be leaving feedback in a workspace. So feedback can come from a lot of different areas. And this is kind of where the process you use that feedback, right? When you're improving your knowledge articles, you take a look at the feedback and you make any kind of adjustments as necessary there. All right, so content help. A lot of questions on dashboards for sure. I think this is going to help a lot of them. I will preface that I only have 2 slides on this, but I will have a Knowledge Management Academy session completely dedicated to all the dashboards that we have out there, when to use them, why to use them, what to expect out of them. So if I'm not going too deep on this today, that's okay. We'll go a little bit deep later. I just want to kind of give you that overview. So this is kind of where your knowledge managers are really key here, right? Reviewing these dashboards and reviewing this data and kind of getting processes in play, or communicating with teams, or communicating with the knowledge process owner on what needs to be done. So we have lots of different dashboards. Some are paid, some are out of the box. Some would come with your different workflow subscriptions that you have out there. So we have a lot of different dashboards that your knowledge managers can use to kind of review those articles. They can kind of set cadence. You can expand these dashboards as needed. So just like any other dashboard in ServiceNow, you can add your own kind of reports and widgets there. They can use these dashboards to really kind of identify maybe high and low performing articles and make decisions based upon that. They can look at feedback from here. And again, this is kind of where they take that really high level look at their knowledge base and how it's doing, make those decisions, make the communications they need to do, and then also kind of work with that process owner to ensure that their knowledge base is aligning with those business outcomes. So here's a great visual on all the dashboards we have out there. Real quick, we have our overview dashboard. This is more reports. So it is a free dashboard. It's been around for a while. A snapshot in time, right, of your life cycle, your feedback, your usage. So really helpful dashboard. It's got a lot of good reports in there. We have our knowledge management dashboard. So this is a performance analytics content pack dashboard. So a lot of the same things as the reporting one, but using PA indicators, seeing trends. This is where you're going to see kind of click-through rates. We have an unsuccessful searches widget. We have an AQI widget on here. So I know I got a lot of questions about the AQI on that one. So this is kind of going to be where you're going to go to check AQI out of the box. Not to say you can't build in your own reports and put them on this dashboard, you can, but if you were looking for something out of the box, this dashboard is going to contain it. Knowledge demand insights. This is kind of your knowledge gaps dashboard. So this is built off predictive intelligence. It uses machine learning and clustering. So kind of what that does at a really high level. Let's say that you have maybe like 25 cases that are all similar, or 25 incidents, and none of them have knowledge articles attached. That clustering is going to gather, all those cases together outside of your hundreds of cases, right? It's going to cluster those together. Your knowledge manager can go through and create a knowledge gap from there and kind of assign that out via routing rules to whoever needs to do it. So, at the end of the day, the kind of outcome of this is whoever gets that kind of knowledge gap or feedback task, they know that they need to create a knowledge article. And here is the 25 similar cases that support why that article needs to be created and how you can pull information from that. Very manual right now. A lot of exciting things coming out on the horizon with Gen AI on this. So kind of be tuned, safe harbor on that. We are looking at enhancing that. Self-service deflection. That's one I get a lot. So you'll see kind of in these two dashboards, we don't speak to self-service too much, right? These are kind of more knowledge manager processes, but we do have a CSM, self-service analytics dashboard. And then ITSM and HR service delivery has their own dashboards as well that have out-of-the-box self-service deflection type widgets put in. And they do use what we call the self-service framework. So an underlying framework that has different patterns. When you install these plugins, it's going to install that stuff out of the box for you. So before kind of going in and deciding to kind of build your own self-service deflection type reports and things like that, see if you're licensed for these and start checking them out first and let them install all the out-of-the-box architecture for you and then kind of build off there. Any questions, I'd say get with your solution consultants and we can get you demos and stuff on them. But self-service are kind of going to be driven out to the products and the processes that knowledge is supposed to be deflecting for, rather than us kind of housing it in these dashboards, if that makes sense. User experience analytics and AI search analytics. So I mentioned navigation paths. So kind of tracking how your users are moving through Employee Center or mobile or Next Experience. Are they searching? Are they finding articles? Are they looking at articles and then creating cases? Like kind of what's going on? What kind of trends do we see with that? What do we need to kind of do to reduce that? And then AI search analytics, kind of really getting deeper on the searches that your users are doing with the AI search, the terms that they're putting in, how they're clicking, different queries. So a lot of powerful kind of metrics in that. Another good reason to kind of switch from Zing search to AI search if you haven't already, because our Zing search reporting capabilities are more table-based and they're more limited than what you're going to get with AI search. So there is an AI Search Academy that can go deeper on this dashboard, and I'll discuss it in a future academy as well. So I just saw a good question here. What does KCS stand for? I only got about 10 minutes or so. This has been kind of a lengthy session. So KCS is knowledge-centered service. And it's just a methodology that's been created from the Consortium for Service Innovation. So that's a kind of an overall governing body made up of, a lot of different customers who use knowledge management and a lot of different kind of vendors and products out there. So we're just one of them. There's a lot of other, companies out there that have knowledge management products that contribute to this. We're all kind of just contributing best practices and kind of overseeing this methodology. So at a high level, it's owned by the Consortium for Service Innovation, and it's really meant for the continuous improvement of knowledge based upon experience of agents and kind of patterns observed by knowledge reuse. Very high level definition. I definitely would check out kind of our FAQ and our case study on how we used it. But some kind of top things I want to leave you with on KCS that I do get a lot of questions about. So do you have to use it to use ServiceNow knowledge management? You don't. So our tool or our product supports either using knowledge management with or without KCS, right? KCS is a methodology that your organization would need to choose to adopt. There's a lot of kind of processes and practices that go along with that. There's an adoption strategy that goes along with that. There's training, there's coaching programs. So it's a lot larger than just turning on some things in ServiceNow. Our product is a verified kind of tool. We're V6 verified or version 6 verified. So we support kind of KCS processes and practices with our capabilities and our tooling, but we don't really own the methodology. The consortium owns that. So if you're kind of looking for any guidance on what is KCS, I'd like to adopt it. How do I do that? I'd like to strengthen different things. I am a KCS kind of program customer. The consortium is going to be the main source for that. They're the governing body. They're the ones who have all that guidance. They're going to be the subject matter experts on KCS more so than kind of us as a verified vendor itself. So with that, I would say I don't recommend just turning on KCS in ServiceNow unless you're prepared to use it, just because you're not going to see the full value and the benefit on just setting some plugins up and just setting some roles up. There's a lot more value in actually adopting the methodology itself than just turning on a few features. So if I could leave you with that in KCS is that definitely start checking out the consortium's website. They have workshops that are super helpful. I just took one that by different kind of vendors who know different tools and they know ServiceNow as well. So this is going to be your first place to really go for KCS to understand more about that. I will post a KCS link in the chat. Let me go ahead and do that now. Let's see. Here we go. All right. So that's in there, and I'll post it in the event too. I know I'm getting low on time, and I apologize. I know I have so many questions. Hopefully I answered a lot of them with this deck. If I did not get to you, I will definitely circle back around on the event and send it out. But I did kind of want to touch on these at a very high level. If you see these personas, if you see these roles in your instance, right? If you see these roles in our product docs, they do pertain to using the KCS methodology. So you have your candidates, so inexperienced beginner users who can create articles but need that kind of coach and that review. So they need those coaches, they need those article quality index checks. As they get better and move through coaching, they'll become contributors. So they can create and validate knowledge articles without having to kind of use a knowledge coach or use an article quality index checklist. They can set articles to validated, and I'll cover what that is in just a moment. And then your final stop there is your publisher. These are people who are well versed in KCS. They may be coaches themselves. They don't really need a lot of review or coaching. They typically don't need any, but you could do spot checks there. And if you're concerned about like external facing articles when you're using KCS, these are going to be the people who are creating those, right? These are the people who have been verified to know that they know what a great article is and what to contain in it. So they're going to be the ones who are, publishing those external facing articles rather than these two roles themselves. Your coaches and domain experts, again, these is why we kind of primarily created these roles in ServiceNow, to do that coaching, to do the KCS coaching, to do the article quality index checklist. So while I mentioned you can do a lot of this outside of KCS, there's a kind of a whole documented coaching process within KCS to follow to get a little bit deeper in that. And then your domain expert kind of does a lot of the same things, but they really kind of come into making sure that their product areas and their subject matter areas are covered within a lot of kind of the evolve loop processes, or the processes that happen outside of cases and incidents, and ensure that, also that their products and processes are benefiting from knowledge management, right? So knowledge management is a really great way to get insight into kind of what's happening with my product, right? Are there a bunch of workaround articles? Are these articles being used a lot? Is there something going on with this process that I had to create a knowledge article for? Can I make this process better? How can I use my knowledge articles and how they're being used to kind of take that information and the experience and actually build them into my product and processes? So that's what these folks are primarily for. So KCS, we do have a kind of a full loop process. I would say here, I'm not going to go over all of it. Really, the consortium for service innovation is going to be the best place to kind of take a look at all the processes that go into place. You can see we reuse a lot of the same wording in the non-KCS versus KCS, but to kind of get more information on that, check out the consortium's website, and then also previous academies. I did dig a little bit deeper into this. So I have them on the community article. I kind of extrapolate on these a little bit more and when you should use them, that we just can't get to into this session today. All right. So kind of to wrap up on KCS, one thing I did want to talk about was this confidence field. You may have seen this in your instance and maybe wondering what it was and if you should use it. And it really is kind of for those KCS kind of programmed customers that are using KCS. It really kind of, it indicates the maturity of an article based upon its completeness and its reusability. So, there's 4 different kind of settings for this field, and it does map to our workflows. So a work in progress article is something that hasn't been published yet. Any kind of role can set this if they can contribute. So really, this is kind of just to tell us that articles are work in progress. If you're using KCS, you know that you can use articles that are work in progress. If you're not using KCS, this might be a different departure for you. There's a lot of great explanation on as to why you would want to do that on the consortium's website. Once an article is published, it's either validated or not validated. So your candidates, your inexperienced users, they can't validate articles. Your contributors and publishers and coaches can validate articles. They're the ones who can say, I validated this article, it's complete, it's reusable, it did fix the issue, right? So that's kind of what that field means for KCS. And then archives just means retired. So I kind of mainly created this slide not to really kind of tell you all about the confidence field because it's covered in the KCS materials, but to really kind of tell you how it maps to our workflow states and kind of give you that visual there. So with that, I know we only have a few minutes. I know this was a lengthy one. I did a lot of talking. I've got a lot of great questions and a lot of homework to do after this. And I do thank you guys for sticking with me and asking those questions and just hanging out with me as we kind of go through more of a deeper subject today. So for our next session, I don't have a topic yet. I think this is a good time to either throw it in the chat or get on the community. Let me know what you'd like to see. I'm throwing around the dashboards and the analytics in June, but if there's like a more pressing topic that we want to see before that, let me know because I have some time to build that. I was kind of waiting to see feedback on this. I was waiting to see feedback we get from knowledge and kind of take that to decide the next topic. It's in June just because I'm going to be at the consortium's member summit in April. So if you are a consortium member, you are using KCS, I'm going to be there. I'd love to talk to you. Love to talk to you about your processes, what you'd like to see in the product. So I'll be there in April. That's why I'm skipping that academy. And of course, May is knowledge. We're going to have some great knowledge management sessions, particularly around Gen AI. So if you're wondering what's coming out for knowledge management in Gen AI, Knowledge 24 is going to be the time where we're going to start really kind of unpacking that for everyone. So that's why we're skipping that one. But those Academy shorts that I mentioned, right? Those really 10-minute short videos where I deep dive. I'm going to make it a point, since we are missing some academies, to get some of those out to make up for April and May. So be on the lookout for that. And then my last kind of slide here, of course, I got to shout out for more academies. So we have different academies from our platform team out there. They're on the Now platform product page. anything Gen AI related, whether it's like consuming articles or generating articles, go to the AI Academy. I'm going to be there in a couple months presenting. Analytics Academy is a really good one for reporting and dashboards and kind of getting the basics of that. So a lot of great different academies out here for you to check out. And I appreciate everyone's kind of chat. I think we have some good topics for next time that I'll kind of parse through and take a look at. But with that, let me just drop the Knowledge Management Product Hub link in here one more time. This is where we're going to take all those questions, right? And I'm going to transcribe them and put them on the community for you. So I want to make sure that you know where to find that. So with that, thank you, everyone. I will return in June, but feel free to reach out to me on the community like always, and keep an eye out for more Academy short videos. And I really appreciate your time today. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.